Alright, today we're going to be looking at Super Sculpey as media for electroforming. Okay? Now, straight out of the box, if you just bake this stuff, it's so easy to paint with a conductive paint. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how do you mix media. Okay? Meaning, how do you apply this to copper? How do you keep applying it? How do you build up composition with it? And what is your last step, first step? So just know that it's kind of a composition trick when it comes down to this stuff, because whatever you use in your composition has to be able to be baked at 275 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? That means anything that you use in your composition, like let's say super glue for example, will not work. Super glue fails at about 210, so this is going to go past 210. So when you go to attach something at the very end, there's many different forms of this stuff right here. Bacon bond. Okay, there's bacon bond. There's polyclay, and I think there's about 3 or 4 more, but none of them will hold a crystal in place correctly, especially on rings. Okay, so for example, you could use bacon bond on a stone. Okay? You could build up a composition. But this last stone is resting up against the Sculpey. This can't be bacon bond on. This has to be super glued on. Even though in composition work, the crystals are being held into place by the copper. That's it. I mean, the copper is really holding everything in place. Not glue, not anything. It's still wise to have a really good base, okay? Even though that these are being held in place by the copper, underneath that is super glue. Okay, way down deep in this ring. Cool. And the reason I know this is because I've built many rings. The only ones that ever came back was the ones I experimented a long time ago with the fact that bacon bond and Sculpey. Yeah, they don't act as a good media to hold things like crystals in place. So you can build everything, your forms, everything on top of copper necklaces, on top of crystals, but that's the only rule. Alright, so what else? Well, let's say for example I was attaching something that I looped around like this. I wouldn't have to attach with bacon bond, okay? Because technically this is going all the way around the object and attaching to itself. So this was never bacon bond on, and you can see it's got a good mixed media where it's got this copper, and now I have this piece of Sculpey attached to it, and all I do is have to paint everything around it with conductive paint. Alright, so let's look at a few building composition rules, we'll call them that, when using this stuff. We'll start out with a very clean ring shank. Again, this could be anything really. It could be a ring shank, it could be a piece of copper, whatever. Just using this as an example. So in order to apply anything to this, any Sculpey. I take a little of this bacon bond and I put it in the area. What if I mess up? Acetone. Acetone totally takes this stuff off. In fact, that's the only thing that'll clean this brush too. Sweet. So plop that down. Cool. Now I could bake that at 275 degrees for 15 minutes and it would be totally bonded to the ring. Much like this one is. Now it's hardened because I had thrown it in the oven. I can't peel it up. Again, there's going to be a coat of copper over the top of everything anyway, so this won't ever matter. Just as long as it has lots and lots of texture. So for me in composition work, I don't want to take and do 1,000 baking sessions just to get one ring. There's no profit in that. I want to be able to finish out the composition within a few minutes. So there is an alternative here. So you could start out just using tools, or you can use those texture things I made in one video. But the thing about Sculpey is really nice. Let's say I want to just sculpt on this a little bit and then walk away. 1 week later, I could still come back and it's still good. So there's no hurry here. If I was to make, let's say, something that a piece of a crystal is sitting on, I probably want to leave some texture at the very top. That would lock the super glue into place. I like what I'm seeing right now, and here's the one thing about Sculpey is it's not very friendly with people that are very clumsy and they want to touch it because it doesn't hold detail very well. I mean, it does, but then if you touch it just a little bit, what happens is you lose all that detail. So that's where I use a Wagner heat gun. Okay? Wagner heat guns have the ability to change the temperature. In this case, I'm going to set it to 950 degrees on high. Don't get it close, just wave it around. go. We're going to refer to this stage as half baked. Okay, it's technically not baked all the way, but this is a way to preserve details, and now I can touch it without it actually losing those details. Cool. Now you can apply texture to the ring shank using, let's say, external texture too, and have the bacon bond hold that texture into place. I'll give you an example of that. You know what I love about this stuff? The gap filling. It just gap fills like no other. Cool. So for example, I could put a texture on there if I wanted to. And I'm looking around for something. Hold on. I'm going to be adding these glass beads. These are really small things. See how small they are? But they make amazing texture. So I can apply those to the area. And since these will survive 275 degrees Fahrenheit, I can use those in my composition if I wanted to. Cool. Now in order to set that, again I'll use a heat gun. Alright, so far so good. If I want to add further details, I could, with texture and whatnot. Here's bacon bond, and you can use bacon bond in a syringe. Syringes come in many different nozzles. You can get these on Amazon. These aren't sharp. Okay. But if I wanted to add detail that's a little thicker, I could use this one. So that's a good way to play or apply little daubs every once in a while. This one's kind of big. It's kind of like frosting. And I kind of like those drips. Cool. Again, you can heat that up, add more, heat that up, add more. So You can see the compositioning that you can apply with this. When I get all done with it, that's when I bake it. And I can bake it as many times as I want. Alright, Sculpey to Sculpey. This is dry Sculpey. And if I want to apply more to it, that's where I have to add Bacon Bond onto the surface. And then I can apply more wet Sculpey to it. If I go to try to attach dry to dry, it will not work. So Sculpey can be tooled. That's what's really nice about it. Give me an example of that. And these are just really harsh examples. Alright, cool, got my piece on there. Now, if I was going to tool that in any way, I would have to hit it with a hairdryer or the Wagner heat gun. Okay, so for me, I really don't like waiting on things. I don't know. I'm really good at not waiting. This is called dust off. When you turn a can of dust off upside down, blow this. Yeah, like this. And then spray it. This sprays super cold liquid. Okay. CO2. So when this stuff is kind of warm, it's still soft, but that cools it right down. Now you can just drill right into it. And since you can drill into it, you can add things to that, like wire. I don't know why, but you can. You can. But that's how I got the spider legs on my spider. Now, you notice it's a little wobbly, see? Okay, cool. Well, that's what Bacon Bond's for. You can actually put that in that hole. And then heat it with a heat gun. And that will make it so that it's bonded with that piece. You can kind of see that how it's in the hole because I went like this and then pulled it into the hole. I'm going to hit that with the dryer. Alright, so that's a lot more form fitting in there. I can use that in my composition now. Okay, now the really cool stuff. This wire right here, right? It looks too mechanical. But you could paint the Bacon Bond right on the wire to make it look organic. And what's really cool is you can pose it after the fact. Now if you want to add texture to it, you have to put first a layer of Bacon Bond on the wire, and then you can add texture to it after the fact. So this is going to be my base layer on the wire. I'll heat that up. After it's been heated, you notice I can move this around and the Bacon Bond stays in place. It moves with the wire. Good for tentacles, good for arms, good for squids. Yeah, I mentioned texture after the fact. So now, if you wanted to make it where that was interesting, so you can see Bacon Bond dots on that one. I'll heat that up. And because the composition is kind of warm still, let's cool it down. And it's rock hard. And that texture has maintained itself on that wire just from that Bacon Bond. So now you got fat spots in there. Alright, let's review. So let's think I was doing this with epoxy sculpt, for example. With epoxy sculpt, for every change I made, I would have had to wait like 3 to 4 hours for the epoxy sculpt to dry. Okay? If I was using super glue and baking soda, I could never get the sculpting capabilities. You know what I mean? I could never texture it. That wouldn't work. I could tool it, but that's about it. What I'm basically able to do is with this, you know, I can build massive detail if I wanted to and freeze it. Now you can kind of see like how this was made, where these little dots were applied, it was frozen. And then I added this on there with Bacon Bond and froze it. And then added this on there and froze it. And once I got all done, and then I applied the crystal to it. In this case, I took a really long extrude, texturized it, and then wrapped it around. I didn't texturize it while it was wrapped, I texturized it before it was wrapped. Lots of possibilities. This is like the ugliest thing I ever made, but it's just to show you, you know, the steps in composition work. Alright, so I made this really ugly thing. What if I want it off? Okay. Well, Sculpey and Bacon Bond hate acetone. So technically I could bake this and I could throw it in acetone and it would in about 10 minutes it would fall off. So it's not very solvent friendly at all. Just know that, because let's say I had a sealant on here like, let's say nail polish enamel, okay? And I went to go coat this crystal with some kind of clear enamel, and then I wanted to remove it after the fact. Well, I have to be kind of careful throwing this whole thing, even though it has copper over the top of it, in acetone, because it would weaken the inside of it. So that's just a note. If you're doing rings with this stuff, don't just throw them in acetone. This one would be okay, this spider, because there's no holes. Nowhere on it. This spider ring, however, if I did have a coating on this crystal, I would have had to remove it using acetone. The only way to do that is wipe it down using paper towel. Okay, I couldn't throw this whole thing in there. This crystal is attached with glue onto the Sculpey, and that Sculpey did have a lot of texture, so it could grip onto it. But you can see now, like these wires here, all that is Sculpey painted onto the wires. And yeah, the whole thing's got a really cool organic feel to it. And here's a character I'm making right now, an octopus. This was sculpted, it was all put on there, it was baked, and then I drilled holes, filled it with Bacon Bond, put these wires in there, and now the wires are in place, and now I could paint these wires, sculpt them around. So many possibilities, makes your head hurt. Alright, so before I leave you with all that, that's a lot of information. I do have two forms of this. I have like a Sculpey Bacon Bond and a liquid polyclay. Now, I found I really like this, okay? The Sculpey Bacon Bond feels a lot more sturdy when it comes down to it. This is a little bit more clear. I know this is going to be cool, I just haven't found an application for it yet. But if you're just starting out, this is what you need, in my humble opinion. The firm really helps. You definitely need one of these. It's a clay extruder. You can get all kinds of detail with it, and it's ran from a screw. So you put the clay in there and then you turn this and it pops out. So this is a really good, this is very handy. Definitely get these for detail. But there's not much here. Once you have these brushes, they're good forever. They're never going to dry out. You only need 2 of them. Maybe a wide and a sable. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this video with all the nuances and ideas of using Sculpey in your electroforming process. If you do paint this stuff, thin down your paint. You'll like it. Okay? If you're interested in other stuff like learning how to electroform, I have a school open at firstdensitymaterial.com. It's got a well laid out curriculum for those people that, you know, like taking classes and things. It's a at your own pace class. It's good forever. And yeah, it's a very well laid out scaffolded design where it teaches you how to electroform, it teaches you how to maintain your liquid, how to do chemistry. So maybe you want to try that out. Check it out if you're interested in what I'm talking about. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, it's okay too. So I'm glad you came. Thank you, and have a good one.